This is a tutorial for the node PPG multi-instance for PPG 2.0 for Bifrost. The node PPG multi-instance is used to place multiple instances on a single polygon. So it's going to iterate over all the polygons that you select in the face selections. And it will then automatically select the longest edge and then try to place the instances in the middle of this polygon. It works perfect for rectangular or four-sided polygons and has some issues with other shapes of polygons. So I would recommend it, use it mainly for four-sided polygons. You see that once I plugged in the geometry and selected some polygons, or the one that is available here, we see the selected edge, which is the longest edge here. And we see these little coordinate systems that show us the orientation of the coordinate system along this or for these instances. There's no way to place the instances or to rotate the instances from within the node. So I recommend to make sure that they are in the correct orientation. I made some numbers here from polygons, and let me unhide one of those. So you see that we are currently looking down the x-axis. So in this direction, actually the direction of the selected edge here, that is my positive x-axis. Now for the resulting instances, this would mean they would be in the same orientation down this positive x-axis. So this 5 here, or this number, is in the correct orientation for the instancing now. You need to make sure that these instances are placed correctly. Otherwise you can place them interactively. That's no problem. You can see the result interactively. So let's have a look now when I picked all of these instances in the correct order. Let's open the outliner again. So what I did here was to do something like this, to try to pick them all in the correct order and then drag them into Bifrost to make sure that the resulting array, which is this one over here, has the right order. That is very important because the node will pick them one by one from this array, and when the array is messed up, then you have a messed up order here. So here we see we have a correct order. So most of the time, let's be honest, most of the time it's going to be just one instance, like a pole or something that you want to repeat along the polygons. But in this case, we have some sort of a pattern already here, a sequential pattern. So we count from 0 to 9, and then we start over from 0 to 9, and then we start over. So you get the idea. It simply repeats this sequence or this array of instances one by one. There are other ways to select these instances, but let's first have a look at the settings here and the position of and the count of the instances. So we have a setting for a distance here. It tries to maintain this distance. So no matter what I said, it's real world units here. So it tries to keep 1.5, almost 1.5 units between these letters, or between the pivots that it places on the polygons. Let's put that back. I can also say I want a fixed number of polygons. When I scale this underlying polygon, you see that it reacts very much like PPG multicut, in that it tries to place as many instances as possible, but it's always a whole number. So the distance between the instances needs to be a little bit flexible. Then we have this position attribute here, position port here, which is used to place the objects left and right on the polygon. So at a setting of 0, it will be, the pivots will be exactly on this edge here. And in a setting of 1, they will be exactly on the opposite edge. Side space is actually different in that it works in real world units again. So this position is a relative setting, relative to this edge. And if it's an irregular quad polygon, then you will see, on one side they move a little bit faster than on the other side, because it's just a relative setting. So the side space here lets me leave some space on the side of the polygon. So 2 units here will mean 2 units in the real world on both sides of the thing. And then I can still shift it around with this one here, with shift. So I can move them to the beginning. And then, of course, we would have 4 units at the end here, because 2 times 2. and of course shift it over to the other side. This is limited from 0 to 1, but you can of course edit the node and change this and overshoot if you like. Set it back to 0.0 and then side space to 0 to use the whole space. So these settings are pretty simple. You have then random settings like for the X translation, so you can move them left and right a little bit, it's no problem. Same for scaling and rotation, make the whole thing a little bit random if you need that. Let's come back to this instance selection here. So we have this array of instance objects, and we simply sequentially, pick one by one. You can also pick them randomly. So just, use a random selection of these instances and then use a random seed to get different variations of these random numbers until you find something that pleases you. And the third one here is a pattern. I've built in my pattern generator, which allows you to place these objects in different, or place these instances in different orders. So loop and start is the same as sequential. So it will simply, pick the instances sequentially, and when it reaches the end, it simply starts over. There's a bounce option. So bounce means it places them until it reaches the end of the sequence and then counts backwards immediately. Immediately means there's also a bounce plus, where it repeats the last number again before it counts back, and then repeats the first one as well before it counts back. That's the bounce plus. There is a fill option, which simply fills the rest with the last thing it sees. So no matter how you do it, when you reverse the pattern, for example, the 0 will be repeated because that's the last one it sees. And there's a stop option. The stop option simply says, okay, I place the sequence once, but then I stop it. It can be useful with some other options here. So let's use stop here and try out the mirror at center. So mirror at center says I'm cutting the whole thing in half. Use this right one, the right half here first. So I do my sequence here and then stop, because that's the option here, stop, or I can also fill it or loop it or whatever. But then after I've done that, I take this whole right half and mirror it over to the other side. So we start here, the same thing in reverse from the mirror. And you see there are 2 zeros in the middle, but that's only because there's an even number of instances on this thing here. If it's an odd number, then there's only 1 0 in the middle. So you see here, once I move that, it needs to duplicate or not duplicate depending on how many of these instances I have overall. If it's an even number, we need 2 in the middle. Good. So that's mirror at the center. And then we have this weird thing, and I'll leave it at stop to better show you what it's doing. Then we have this to align it at the end. So that reverses the whole process without reversing the actual sequence. So it goes from the end and goes counting backwards, and I can say fill it, and you see it's going to fill with the last thing it sees with the 0 in the left direction, and same with bounce plus. So it bounces here, counts to 9, and bounces there, counts to 0, and so on. So and looping again, is simply the other way around. There it reverses the whole thing. What else do we have here? A line at the end. Oh yeah, and of course, reverse the whole pattern simply instead of you putting in the node here that reverses this thing. So it's pretty simple. There is another thing that I built in, and I don't know if it's redundant, because you can always change this sequence here to get something to make a pattern, right? There is an additional input here for a pattern sequence. Now, when I use this node here, string to array, I can enter, numbers like 0, 4, 6. I enter these numbers and turn them into an integer array and plug it into here. And now my sequence is 0, 4, 6. And it repeats it because it loops currently. So let's go back here. It loops. I can stop. So it stops after the first iteration. and then I can bounce plus it and so on. So you get the idea. The cool thing with this is that you can also enter numbers that are not really there. So for example, I can enter a number like 20 and say, okay, I only have 10 instances. A number of 20 is not going to be there. And what's the result of that? It's going to be an empty place. So with this pattern here, now I have one empty place. I can make another one by entering a 20 because I know that 20 is not there. So I have empty places here. That's pretty cool actually. And by that, with all these options of bouncing and mirroring and mirroring at the center and so on, we can create all kinds of patterns. It's sometimes a little bit of playing around, but you can really do a lot with this if you need patterns. As I said, most of the time it's just going to be one object, one instance object the whole way, like a handrail or something like that, which should be easy to achieve with PPG multi-instance.